The Watership Down Podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 217, in which we'll be going through Chapter 8 of the graphic novel, The Hard Road. First though, as a follow-up to the last episode, Rob Lylyk, for that is how his name is actually pronounced, has been in touch again with two relevant passages from Richard Adams' autobiography, The Day Gone By. So here is the account of what happened to Paddy Kavanagh, the inspiration for Bigwig, in Richard Adams' own words. Just to warn you, there's one graphic reference to injuries. Quote, "During the week, despite the adverse weather, planes were flown from England to drop supplies to 1st Airborne. They had a bad time from German flak, and many were lost. There was no ground-to-air communication, a bad fault surely, on account of this, and also because the situation on the ground was so confused, and in the rain visibility was so bad, most of the panniers fell outside the Oosterbeek perimeter. Colonel Pack asked Paddy to take his platoon and try to collect what he could of the nearer ones. Paddy and Sergeant McDowell, their blokes and their jeeps, set out from the 1st Airborne lines and drove down a narrow empty lane bordered by fairly thick woodland. As they were coming over a little humpback bridge, they were caught in German small arms fire. Corporal Wiggins and several more died instantly. Several jeeps were smashed up. Paddy grabbed a brain gun and leapt into the ditch beside the verge, whence he returned the German fire. Sergeant McDowell joined him. 'Take the blokes, Sergeant,' he yelled Paddy. 'Get them out of here. Move back through the woods. I'll cover you.' 'You sure of that, sir?' asked McDowell. 'Yes,' answered Paddy. 'Get out. That's an order.' Somehow or other, Sergeant McDowell got most of the platoon together inside the edge of the wood. 3 or 4 lay writhing and screaming on the road. There was blood everywhere. Paddy, who had several magazines, continued firing. The platoon retreated on foot. After a minute or two, they stopped to listen. Sergeant McDowell told me how you could hear the rip-rip of the German Schmeissers against the slower rat-tat-tat of the Bren, a dreadful counterpoint. Suddenly there was an explosion, and then nothing more. Paddy lies among the others in the divisional cemetery at Oosterbeek." End quote. Rob says that on page 303 Richard Adams states the parallels to Watership Down. Quote, "It would be wearisome and not really helpful to give a character sketch of each officer in the company. There are about 12 or 13 altogether, and they comprise a very strong team, much stronger than any I had yet come across. Apart from that, collectively they have importance to this book, since later, from my memory, they provided the idea for Hazel and his rabbits in Watership Down. By this, I do not mean that each of Hazel's rabbits corresponds to a particular officer in 250 Company. Certainly the idea of the wandering, endangered and independent band, individually different, yet mutually reliant, came from my experience of the company. But out of all of us, I think, there are only 2 direct parallels. Hazel is John Gifford, and Bigwig is Paddy Kavanagh." End quote. Thank you for those references, Rob. They are another potent reminder of the experiences that gave birth to our band of 11 wandering rabbits. So then, let's see how they're doing. The graphic novel, Chapter 8, The Hard Road. Chapter 8 of the graphic novel has 9 pages and covers the last 2 1/4 full pages of Chapter 9 of the original novel, The Crow and the Beanfield, as well as Chapter 10, The Road and the Common, and Chapter 11, Hard Going. A total of 28 basic pages and 25.5 full pages, meaning that this chapter compresses the plot by 21 basic pages and 16.5 full pages. This is the largest compression of the story yet in a single chapter. It indicates a creative decision to cut down the story from the arrival at the Beanfield to the arrival at Cowslip's Warren by a substantial margin. The chapter opens with 4 images that seem to represent things that the rabbits sense are present nearby. They are a crow in a tree calling, a dog sniffing the ground, a man with a shotgun whose face we do not see, and a yellow and black beetle. The rabbits are resting in the Beanfield. The plants are not as tall as they have been represented as being in other visual portrayals of Watership Down. We can see 9 of them. In the foreground, Hazel is licking Pipkin's paw and says it's almost out, meaning the thorn he has picked up. With the thorn in his mouth, Hazel comments on its size. He's not surprised Pipkin couldn't run. Pipkin says he was afraid they'd leave him behind. Hazel nuzzles him and says he would never do that. As they speak, the yellow and black beetle we saw earlier crawls past them. Hazel tells Pipkin to lick the wound until it feels better, then to get some rest. They will press forward that night after a good rest. We see the sun set over fields, a road at night, then the road in daylight. It seems they waited until the next day before moving on, as we see the rabbits arrive at the road which lies right next to the site of the bean field. Or is the implication that they have started travelling on at night, in which case they would have arrived at the road at night? Bravery places a cautious paw on the tarmac of the road. We see the front of a white Morris Minor Crudidu, a car common in the UK in the 1960s and 70s. Then the side of the car. Then the rabbits, their ears swept in the wash of its passing. Hazel exclaims that he didn't think they could go that fast. Bigwig explains that the road is what enables Crudidu to go that fast. Hazel questions this using an ambiguous phrase that isn't clear whether he is asking if roads or Crudidu are dangerous. Bigwig's reply seems to reference cars, which he says aren't really of any consequence except at night when they're evil. Bravery says the road looks like a river. Bigwig explains that it is a man thing that is made so a Crudidu can run faster than a rabbit. Bravery's next question is the natural one. Can they catch rabbits? Bigwig responds that they take no notice of them. He adds they might not even be alive. He offers to show them and sits at the edge of the road. Hazel urges him to be careful. A yellow Ford Anglia approaches. It speeds past Bigwig, causing him no harm. Bigwig points this out. Dandelion says Crudidu smell awful, but Bigwig is sniffing the air. There is something else that smells awful. He approaches it. We see blood on the road, quills with flies buzzing around them, and another one of the black and yellow beetles which seem to be acting as a signifier of death. It is a dead Yona, or hedgehog. Bigwig says it must have come out at night. He adds that at night Crudidu have bright lights that make you unable to think or move. That is when they crush you. It is night again. The rabbits cross a stone bridge over a ditch. We see them run through the graveyard of Newtown Church and then through woodland. They have reached Newtown Common. And it was at this point in this retelling of the story that I first realised what is missing from this version. For it is this section of the original story that relies more than many others on an external narrator, without which the nightmare experience of crossing the common can only be hinted at, unless you portray the thoughts of the rabbits in words, which this version also seems to try to avoid. Not having an external narrator describing the emotional experience Hazel and his companions are going through was very obviously a deliberate choice, and by no means an incorrect one. But it does mean that there is only so much of this nightmare experience that can be portrayed here, which is possibly why this part of the story is so compressed. We see grass tufts on the common. Hazel runs alongside Pipkin, saying, "Not too far," a phrase he is repeating. A wider view of the common. A rabbit that may be Acorn comments to Hazel that this is a bad place. Hazel is still repeating his phrase to Pipkin over and over, as if also to himself. Pipkin looks at him as if reassured. A low view of the common, with Hazel saying it again, his voice emerging from the vegetation, though we cannot see him. The rabbits are resting. Acorn and Hawkbit approach Hazel. The third member of the trio from the book, Speedwell, is absent in this version. Acorn says they have been talking and they have had enough. Hawkbit adds it was stupid to come this far. Hazel tries to reassure them, but Acorn makes it clear they don't believe him. Hawkbit adds that Hazel didn't know about the road. Acorn says they want to go back. Bigwig intervenes angrily, pointing out they will probably get killed for wounding an Owsler officer. Hawkbit is looking nervous, but points out that they didn't wound Captain Holly. Bigwig loses his temper, calling them both dung-faced disgraces. But Hawkbit isn't finished. He says Bigwig is not Chief Rabbit. He begins to add that they don't have to listen to him, but doesn't get to finish. Bigwig bites his ear, hard. Hazel shouts angrily for him to stop. And here I feel the need to include a comment that would normally come in the next section when I compare the graphic novel with the original, but here, given the compression of this section of the story, it feels relevant at this point. In the book, Bigwig goes into a long tirade at Acorn, Speedwell and Hawkbit, most of which we do not hear, during which he bites Hawkbit on the throat. Meanwhile, Hazel and Fiver climb a bank, and this is where Fiver sees Watership Down for the first time in the distance, and says that's where they need to go. But he also warns of a strange mist that lies between them and Watership Down. It is a potent episode in the story, and here it is entirely absent. which is a shame. They then return to the main group to discover what Bigwig has done. As poor Acorn looks at his injured ear and keeps repeating the phrase, "my ear," Hazel upbraids Bigwig in front of the group. Bigwig does not respond. He may know he has gone too far. Hazel closes by saying they are all frightened and tired. We see a shot of the lightening horizon as, lost once again among the undergrowth, Hazel's voice repeats twice that they are not far now. Comparison with the book. In the novel, the rabbit's rest among the beans is interrupted by the firing of a shotgun. Here we just see that there is a person with a shotgun nearby. The action of this chapter seems to take place over 2 nights in the graphic novel, with the rabbits only leaving the bean field for the road after sunrise, with the next night happening strangely as they reach the churchyard which lies next to the road. In the novel, by contrast, they reach the road as the sun is setting and Newtown churchyard as the moon rises, and the whole extended episode on the common takes place during that one night. Given the relatively small area covered by the Beanfield and Newtown Church, the timescale of the original does seem more realistic. As I said in the last section, the extended narrative of the trauma of crossing the common, as well as the significant conversation between Hazel and Fiver after the rebellion, is entirely absent here. As for that matter is the lost paragraph, apparently, with this chapter ending with the group still on the common. Next time, the rabbits reach the other side of the common and meet a stranger.